Close your eyes for just a second and think about this. Imagine waking up one morning and realizing something absolutely amazing, something that changes everything you thought you knew about happiness. You realize that the biggest sense of freedom you've ever felt didn't come from a big paycheck or getting a fancy new title at work. And it didn't even come from finding that one person who was supposed to make your life complete. Instead, it came from something much more basic and much more powerful. It came from finally belonging to yourself. For a lot of men who've reached their senior years, this realization shows up quite late in the game. It often happens after they've spent 40 or 50 years doing exactly what everyone else expected of them, carrying heavy loads of responsibility and making sure everyone else was taken care of before they even thought about their own needs. By the time they finally see this truth, they usually wish they'd found it decades ago. But here's the beautiful part. It's never too late to discover who you really are. For a long time, the world has told men that their value is measured by how many people are leaning on them. Society says a man's success is about the people who need him to survive. First, he's told he has to build a career and climb the ladder. Then, he's told he has to provide for a family, be the one who fixes every problem, make big sacrifices, and do it all without ever saying a word or letting anyone see him struggle. Somewhere along that long road, many men just stop asking themselves a very simple but very important question. What kind of life do I actually want to enjoy living? But something really special starts to take place once a man crosses that line into his 60s. Many men stop trying to win everyone else's approval, and they start looking for something much better. They start looking for peace. They begin to see that being a single man in his senior years doesn't have to mean he's lonely or that he's failed at life. It doesn't mean he was rejected by the world. In many ways, it becomes the very first time in his life that he has the chance to live by his own rules instead of trying to fit into the box everyone else built for him. What we're going to talk about today might completely change the way you think about being alone or getting older. We're diving into why so many single older men say this part of their lives is the most peaceful and happy time they've ever known. And I promise you, once you see the way the mind changes during this time, you might never look at life the same way again. So stick with me, because what I'm about to share could be the perspective shift you didn't know you needed. For most of a man's life, the world is incredibly loud. There's so much noise that he eventually stops even noticing it's there. From the second he opens his eyes in the morning, there are people waiting for him to do something. Big decisions that will change other people's lives, jobs he feels he has to do, and problems that somehow always land on his plate to fix. Over many years, this constant weight becomes a part of who he thinks he is, and because it happens so slowly, one day at a time, most men never even notice how much of their true selves they've buried under all that pressure. Then, life starts to shift in a way they didn't see coming. The things he was responsible for start to change. His children grow up and become adults who can take care of themselves. His career starts to slow down, or it ends completely. That loud voice in his head telling him he has to prove himself to the world starts to get quieter. And for the first time in a very long time, many men find themselves standing in something they haven't felt in years. They find themselves in silence. At the start, that kind of quiet can feel a bit strange. Some men might even think it feels like being lonely because they were taught for so long that being alone must mean something is wrong or that they're missing something important. But as time goes on, many of these men discover that silence isn't empty at all. It's actually full of peace. When there aren't people constantly asking for his time or his help, a man can finally hear what he's thinking. He starts to ask those big questions that he was too busy to think about before. What really makes me smile? Who are the people I actually like spending time with? What things am I just not going to put up with anymore? Those answers don't show up in a single day, but they're much easier to hear when the world isn't shouting at you all the time. That kind of clear thinking changes everything. A man who finally knows who he is doesn't feel the need to chase after people to like him. He doesn't feel like he has to live his life for someone else. Instead, he starts making choices that keep his heart and mind calm. For many men who are older and single, that becomes the best freedom they've ever had. As that clear way of thinking grows, something else starts to happen that many men never expected. They start to feel a level of calm that they haven't felt since they were very young. It isn't the kind of calm that only happens when everything is perfect. It's a much deeper peace that comes from the fact that they're no longer carrying heavy feelings and worries that were never theirs to carry in the first place. Many men spend their whole lives thinking that giving up what they want is just what a good man does. They learn how to stay quiet just to keep the peace at home. They learn to push their own dreams to the bottom of the pile just to make sure everyone else is happy. And while it's true that you have to work together in any relationship, living in a house full of stress and tension for years eventually hurts a man. That kind of stress doesn't always show up as a big explosion. Instead, it just sits there, slowly draining a man's energy, making him less patient, and even making his body feel older than it should. When that constant weight is finally gone, something wonderful happens. The mind starts to settle down. Sleep gets much better and deeper. The simple things in life start to feel good again. A cup of coffee in the morning tastes so much better when you aren't worried about an argument waiting for you in the next room. A walk in the evening feels so much more relaxed when you aren't thinking about a list of problems you have to solve for someone else. A lot of senior men say they had no idea how tired they really were until they finally lived without that stress. This kind of peace isn't about running away from life. It's about realizing that life doesn't have to be one long fight or a constant struggle to keep everyone happy. Once a man feels that kind of quiet in his soul, he starts to protect it. He becomes very careful about who he lets into his life. He learns that true freedom isn't about having a house full of people. It's about keeping the peace he worked so hard to find again. Something else changes once a man finds that quiet heart. His energy starts to return. And I don't just mean he feels like he can stay awake longer. I mean, he gets back that fire for life that was squeezed out of him by years of stress and trying to meet everyone's needs. Many older men don't realize how much energy it takes to be stressed out until that stress is gone. After a while, many men just think being tired all the time is part of getting old, but most of the time, it isn't their age that's the problem. It's the heavy bags they've been carrying for way too long. Once those bags are put down, many men feel like they've been born again. They wake up and actually want to do things. They start walking further. They get back into exercise. They travel to those places they always talked about but never saw. Or they go back to those old hobbies they had to give up years ago because they were just too busy. The best part is that this doesn't happen because someone else did it for them. It happens because they finally have the room in their own lives to take care of themselves. As a man gets his energy back, he also starts to find something else he might have lost along the way. He finds his dignity. I'm not talking about the kind of dignity that comes from having a lot of money or a big house. I'm talking about that quiet, strong feeling you get when you live by your own values. For a long time, many men get used to looking for approval. They work harder so people won't criticize them. They spend years trying to keep everyone smiling without even noticing that their own happiness is always in someone else's hands. But older men who are single often say things are different now. They wake up every day and they don't feel like they have to explain themselves to anyone. They don't have to ask for permission to go for a drive or buy a new book or sit on the porch for 3 hours. Over time, this changes how a man feels when he looks in the mirror. Instead of wondering if he made someone else happy, he starts asking if he's being the man he wants to be. If your life truly belonged only to you starting right now, what kind of life would you choose to build? That's the question every man eventually has to answer for himself.